Steve, thank you for joining me today. I was very fortunate to find your blog, and from what I learned about you, you were kind of an army brat. You lived overseas with your family, a military father, right?
That's right.
Then you came back to Canada, and went to school in Nova Scotia. Then you moved to New Brunswick where you worked. You have an engineering background. And with your job, then you moved to Manitoba.
Yeah, pretty much. I met my wife while I was living in New Brunswick, and her family is here in Winnipeg. So after a while, she wanted to move closer to her family. So I changed jobs and changed provinces to be closer.
While in New Brunswick, one day you became almost starstruck with a train and you took photographs of this train. And this was the beginning of your journey that you are, on right now. So it's been about 25 years since you've been doing this.
That's about right. Yeah.
Do you remember what happened that day?
Well, like growing up, my father was interested in trains a little bit, but not obsessively. He When he was a teenager, he was part of a model train club out in British Columbia, and he always hauled around model trains with us wherever we moved. We had a big wooden trunk of model trains that he hauled along. I still have the wooden trunk, but he wasn't super into trains. And for me, trains were just like most people. Trains are just a thing that are in the way. And so what happened was that my wife and to be and I were traveling around New Brunswick. I was kind of showing her the sights around New Brunswick, and we went to see the flower pot rocks, and we went down to the southern tip of New Brunswick, and so on. And we stopped in Hillsborough, New Brunswick, which is where the New Brunswick Railway Museum is. And we stopped there. I started looking around there, and it was basically there where it happened. I was talking with some of the volunteers there, and they were telling me about their equipment, and I'm just like, oh, this is really interesting. I never really gave much thought to trains before, but this is really interesting. So it kind of started right there.
You really kind of specialized in trains. And you started this blog in 2009,
2005.
2005. Then you took photography more seriously.
Yes. I had been interested in photography for quite a few years before that. I considered myself a half decent photographer, but I didn't take it that seriously. And so when I started taking pictures of trains, I started to take a little more care in how the photographs looked. And I would say definitely my style has evolved in terms of how I take pictures of trains. I take them more pictures of trains more in their environment than in pictures of the train itself. So that's kind of been my evolution. But I studied a lot of other railway photographers that I appreciated their work, and I studied just kind of see and I get an idea of what they were doing, and where they were standing, and where they went to take their pictures, and the light and all that sort of thing that you look at when you take pictures. And talked to some of them, and went on some photo trips with a few photographers that I admired, and just kind of grew it from there. So and then probably about a little over 10 years ago, I started really getting into photographing grain elevators as well. So those are my two main passions for photography.
It's interesting how you nourished this love for trains. You were spending a lot of time around train yards. You were waiting for them to come across bridges and
Hmm.
took photographs. Then you were filming them. Then you got into ethics, and for those who love trains, to make sure that they don't do things that might interfere with the work that people do there on the
Right.
training yards, and also that they don't get into this, hazardous, dangerous behavior. You started to look at trains in different provinces, then even around the world, including Dachau. Even in Dachau, you were photographing the train tracks.
Yes, the train tracks leading into Dachau. Yeah,
Yes,
it's not as enthusiasm for the railway,
yes.
but just kind of recognizing their role in the horrible things that happened there. The Nazis used the railways a lot, and when I was in Germany, I visited the I think it's called the Bundestechnik in Berlin. It's a museum of transportation and technology, but they have a fair-sized railway exhibit, and I was pleased to see that there they really acknowledged the role that the railways had in enabling what the Nazis did, and I'm glad they didn't shy away from that.
In Canada, however, we have a very positive experience with the trains.
Yes. Well, yes, perhaps unless you're perhaps an Indigenous person, it's less positive for sure. It certainly enabled the spread of everyone across the prairies and across the country. So I would say for them, it's probably not a positive experience, but for Canada as a country, absolutely yes. It enabled Canada really. Without railways, British Columbia might not be part of Canada because that was one of their main condition for entering Confederation. So it has a huge influence, especially in Western Canada. Here, the railways were basically created towns out of nothing, out of plains. They they were the lifeblood of communities for many years, and still are for some of them.
You are also a drone pilot, and I noticed
Mhm.
that you're taking a lot of aerials of the train yards, of how, the trains running. Also, you are kind of driving along the train tracks.
Yeah, I started drone photography in 2019, I think maybe, and it adds another dimension literally to photography. I don't. Some people fly drones for fun, for racing and so on, and I appreciate that. But I fly it. I consider it a camera in the sky. It's another platform, right? So for a camera, and it enables a lot of views that you can't get from the ground and different perspective. And I think some people think that maybe drone photography is kind of overused in certain situations, but it allows you to get perspectives that you can't get otherwise. Being mindful of people's privacy, of course, you have to be careful about where you film and safety. But one of my favorite drone photos was there was a in Winnipeg. There's a small railway called the Winnipeg Water District Railway, which is owned by the city, and it's a very unique railway that was built many years ago to service the aqueduct that brings water into Winnipeg. So it has its own railway, and the local tourist railway, the Prairie Dog Central, ran a special train out on the Greater Winnipeg Water District's railway. So it was a really rare excursion. So I positioned myself at the bridge that goes over the Winnipeg floodway, and as the train came across, I moved the drone with the train to follow it across the bridge, basically beside it, parallel to it, following the train across the bridge. And that was one of my favorite drone shoots of all time. Just get that perspective that you absolutely could not get from the ground.
I was looking at your crude oil trains. How long are they?
Well, the longest trains are probably container trains, and they're over 2 miles long. So they're massive. They're 10 to 12,000 feet long. When you go over, I visited Europe a number of times, and you see their trains that are 15, 20, 25 cars, and here in the prairies that is a very short train. So it's a completely different perspective. When you see a wall of containers go by and keep going by and keep going by, it's awe-inspiring just to see how big they are.
There's also this relaxing component watching trains.
You have to be patient with watching trains because they come when they want to. So in general, for freight trains, you don't know when they're going to come. So you have to just kind of sit trackside and wait. Passenger trains run on a schedule, so you have a chance to see those. But otherwise, you just have to be patient, especially in New Brunswick, where there aren't many trains in New Brunswick. So they you might see, if you sat by the tracks for 24 hours, you might see 4 or 5 trains. So if you show up by the tracks, it might be hours before a train comes along. It might be 6 hours, 8 hours. So you just don't know. But out here in the prairies, especially around Winnipeg, there are a lot more trains. So, but still, you still have to be patient, and it's something I struggle with now and then. I'm not a particularly patient person, but you have to kind of just relax and wait. Kind of prepare yourself for when the train shows up, because you only have a moment to capture it. You kind of picture in your head what type of photograph you want to make, or what type of video you want to make, and get everything ready, and then read a book or whatever until the train shows up.
I looked at the trains in each province. What I noticed is that the locomotive, the engines, they do seem to be different from province to province. Here in Newfoundland, the locomotive in Avondale is very different from what I've seen in your area.
Right. There are different generations of locomotives. The Newfoundland locomotives were the Newfoundland Railway was unique in many ways. One of it was it's narrow gauge, so that the rails are closer together than they are most other places in North America. So that was one thing, and the locomotives are a different generation. So the Newfoundland locomotives were ordered in the 60s, and they're much smaller than today's monster locomotives that are, I think the locomotives in the Newfoundland are somewhere like 800 or 1,000 horsepower. And today's mainline freight locomotives are 4,400 horsepower. So they're like 4 times the power at least. So they're much bigger and much more powerful.
How many of the Canadian-based trains do you think run through the United States?
A fair number. It's traffic is not just east-west and not just north-south. If you look at the maps for CN and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, they extend well into the U.S. Canadian Pacific Kansas City extends into Mexico. They have a large American component as well. And some of the tracks dip into the United States and then come back into Canada. For example, there's one route that goes between Winnipeg and Fort Frances, Ontario, that dips into Minnesota briefly, and just the way it was built at the time. There's a line just east of Moose Jaw on the Canadian Pacific that goes down into the States, and a lot of trains go through that route. So they cross the border a lot, for sure.
A very important story that you have to talk about is you photographing and filming the train at the cross sign where the central longitude is.
Yeah, I've always wanted to take that picture. That's not far from Winnipeg. It's just east of Winnipeg on the Trans-Canada Highway. So if you're driving along there's lots of signs advertising it. So I thought it was kind of a unique location to take a picture of. So whenever I was driving in the area to see if there's a train around, and happened to catch one at the right time, so I just pulled off and got the shot. But yeah, it was interesting. It's well worth stopping there if you drive through there, because there's a little sign and area to commemorate it.
While in Manitoba, you started photographing grain elevators.
Yes.
They are unique for the prairies.
Yeah, we have nothing like them in the Maritimes. That's kind of a lie. There is very few grain elevators in the Maritimes, but there are a few. When I first started dating my now wife, we would travel out to Winnipeg or Regina to visit her relatives, and I would see the grain elevators as you drive along, because they were, they used to be located every 8 or 10 miles, and so you'd see them, and I was very fascinated by them because they were new to me. So I took pictures of what I could, but it was really around 2014 when I really got serious about it, because I had kind of photographed them as a train was going by them. You know, just I was there and there was a grain elevator and I photographed them. But I realized in 2014 that they were really disappearing, and I bet if I wanted to take pictures of them, I'd better get off my couch and go out and drive around and take pictures. So, and what really brought it to me was there was one grain elevator in Beausejour outside of Winnipeg, 20 minutes out of Winnipeg, that I'd always meant to go out and photograph, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. And then they knocked it down. So I said, well, I can't have that happen again. So I made some plans of, you know, made up maps of where the grain elevators were, got very organized about my time and where I'd go and routes I would take and so on. And then set out to photograph all the grain elevators in Manitoba. And I didn't finish it in 2014. It took me till 2015, but I got it done. And I'm glad I did, because a lot of the grain elevators that I photographed are not there anymore.
So how many of them are still standing?
I think well, there's wooden grain elevators, which are what you think of the classic grain elevators, and then there's the replacements are the monster concrete grain elevators, or grain terminals, as the grain companies prefer to call them. As far as wooden grain elevators go, I think there's less than 100 in Manitoba. There are more in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan always had the most, and then there's probably a little more than 100 in Alberta, but in Saskatchewan there might be I don't know, 150, 200.
You also take photographs of the landscape. One of these photos is a train chasing a wild goose. Is that a real one?
Yes, yes, that was a happy accident. That was I guess a mildly famous photo of mine that a lot of people liked. Yeah, it was completely by accident. I was out photographing the train, and as I saw that the train was kind of, you know, approaching from one side, I saw the Canada geese were kind of hanging around the tracks, you know, going wherever they feel like Canada geese do. And as the train approached, they took off. So I was basically following the train with my camera, and following the just click 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 as the train went by, and when I looked at, I knew taking the picture that I thought this is going to be a pretty good picture. And then when I, you know, got back home and loaded it onto my computer, I said, yeah, I really like that. So I know a few people have accused me of photoshopping it in, but no, that was there. Yeah, it was a pretty cool experience.
When you go to take pictures and film, is anyone coming with you? Your children, your wife?
When my kids were younger, I used to drag them along with me to see trains, and it was more for them. Them, it was more an outing. Me, it was more to get the kids out of the house, and you know, especially when they were very young. You know, my wife would be looking after the baby, and I'd take the older one out, and so on. And my youngest two kids are not interested in trains, but my oldest one is. He lives in Ontario, and we sometimes will go out together and take pictures of trains together when I'm visiting him. Usually when I'm going out, I don't go with other people. It's mostly because a lot of times when I'm taking pictures of trains, I'm on my way somewhere. It's more kind of well, I'm going to go run these errands and spend an hour taking pictures of trains. It's hard to coordinate with other people to do things like that. And I don't tend to go on like multi-day excursions for taking pictures of trains. A lot of times it's wherever I can find the time, I will do it. So it's hard to. Sometimes I'll meet up with other people who are out there. I mean, I'm not the only one taking pictures of trains by any means. So sometimes I'll see people that I know out there, and we'll stop and chat while we wait for trains.
This mobile game that you have on trains and stations from different countries.
Oh, that's a game. I don't play that game anymore, but I used to play it. It was a lot of fun to play. It was interesting because you get to play with different locomotives and stuff from different countries and so on. And it was interesting to me because I started playing it, and then I made a few YouTube videos of how to play the game, and they really took off. I was surprised because I'd had a YouTube channel for years with trains, and you know, most train videos, 100 people, they might get 100 views, 150, 200 views, unless it was really something special. Because most, I mean, it's videos of trains. Most people don't care about trains, but my videos, instructional videos on those were massive. and tens of thousands of views, and and a lot of questions. A lot of people will comment and ask questions about how do you do this and what happens when you do this and all that kind of stuff, and I help them out that way. And honestly, that's what I found to be the most popular videos of mine on YouTube is instructional videos, basically help people out. So like I made a video of how to change the propellers in your drone because it was something I didn't know how to do. So I figured it out, and then I made a short video of it, just 2 minutes long, and it's been viewed many times. And a lot of people will comment and say, "Thank you for doing this. I didn't know how to do it, and I watched your video, and now I know." And so that's great. I appreciate that, and I like that they help people.
You are writing poems and short stories, and they are actually quite good.
Well, thank
I
you.
was wondering if you could read us a poem and a short story. For example, I would like to suggest Nautilus 7 as a short story. It's not very long.
I have my books here. This is the first book that I wrote. Is when I turned 50, I went on a tour through Alberta and British Columbia, taking pictures of trains and staying at different places. And so this book is basically my experience of that. My wife went with me. My long-suffering wife went with me, and I think she enjoyed it too. But I really enjoyed it. So I wrote a book about that. And then this one is the poetry book that I wrote. That's that. It's a little slimmer for sure.
Since I don't know, would you like to read us a poem that you like?
Sure. It's called A Poem in Two Parts. The dancers roll about the floor, lost in their private embraces. The dancer looks all about him, looking for his partner here just a moment ago. The tempo shifts, the mood moves on, time moves on, time. He feels like the sky today, sunny with cloudy periods, chance of rain. The clouds smear across the sky, hazy, lazy, maybe even crazy. Yet the sun still shines. Good old soul still shines. The short story, yes, I will find it. One moment. Attention, all planets of the Solar Federation. Ace lifted his finger off the transmit button. What the hell are you doing? Sarah asked. Ace chuckled. It's an old song. I always wanted to do that. He keyed the mic again. Beza Flight Control, this is Nautilus 7. Sorry about that. System test. We're looking for clearance to dock. The reply was swift. Nautilus 7, this is Beza Flight Control. Clearance given to dock at Port Delta. Your financials are on file for dock charges. Financials, dock charges. Ace was old enough to remember when stations were starving for traffic and treated visiting crew like royalty. With the outer planets opening up, Earth area traffic had exploded, and stations were in high demand as stepping stones to Jupiter and beyond. Dock charges were just one way they were cashing in. Ace sent a confirmation to Vez and turned to Sarah. Take us in, kid. I'm hitting the head. Stations charge for bathrooms now, too. I'm not a kid, and remember to turn the exhaust fan on this time. Sarah turned to her set of controls and started keying in commands. The Nautilus thrusters lit in a complex sequence as they swung the freighter around to point the ship's tail at the station. Then the pair of main engines lit briefly to slow the ship's approach to Veza Station. Sarah kept a watchful eye on the displays and occasionally made small adjustments as the ship approached Delta Port. Ace drifted back to his seat, grabbing handholds on the way. Going in on manual? You know the ship can do the docking just fine. I want to shake the rust off. It's been too long since I've done any piloting. Ace nodded. It might sound like a rebuke, but Ace knew that there had been little call for any piloting skills in the month-long approach to Earth. The occasional course change to avoid other ships or uncharted rocks was easily handled by the computer, and Ace, as lead pilot, was usually the one at the controls when anything more complex had to be done. Sarah's hands were busy as she cycled through displays, monitoring the steady approach to the station while watching the area around the Nautilus. She paused in one display. What is that? Ace looked over. What do you mean? The display showed a field of stars. It seemed unremarkable to Ace, and still Sarah magnified the image. There was an oval-shaped blur of stars, visibly growing in size. Sarah tapped more controls. Nothing on radar. Comms channel are normal. Just to be safe, she lit the main engines again to stop their approach to Veza Station. Ace copied the display to his own side of the control panel and started adding overlays. It's growing at about 15% per minute. Center is shifting to our right slightly. It's like a, oh crap. Ace keyed the comms. Emergency, emergency, Veza station. Prepare for impact. Prepare, repeat, prepare for impact. His other hand flew over the controls, increasing thrust on the main engines. The radio response was immediate. This is Veza control. Is this some kind of joke? They were serious. The rest of the response was drowned out by the scream of the collision alarm. Some of the screens flashed white briefly, then faded to show a field of debris. Moments later, the Nautilus shook repeatedly as hurtling debris struck her. I have damage control. Take drives, Ace shouted. Get us out of here. Roger, Sarah confirmed in a shaky voice. Her fingers flew over the console. I have propulsion. Main drive 1 is offline, 2 is firing, increasing the emergency thrust. Both pilots were pressed back into their seats by the acceleration. We have multiple breaches, air leakage 2% per minute, closing all hatches, Ace reported. Half our sensors are offline, comms are down, readying to backup. Moments later, confused babbles of shouts and screams blasted from the speakers. What the hell? Let me through. We're losing air. Activate fire suppression. Ace stabbed a button and the voices cut out. Sarah filled the silence. Engine 1 coming back online. Engine 2 is running hot, reducing to 80% thrust. Where are we going besides away? And what was that?
It's interesting, this story, because you, with your trains and the grain elevators, you sound so grounded. But with this story, you're out of this world.
Yeah. Thanks. I enjoy writing. I never really thought I would be like that because when I grew up, I was very technically oriented. I have a degree in computer science, and I've been using computers since grade 10. And that has been my career path, and my first love was computers. So I'm very technically oriented, and English class and so on was not really my favorite thing. I found as I started my blog and started writing there, I found that I really enjoyed telling stories. Whether it's a story about a train or if it's a story about a spaceship, I enjoy the storytelling part of it.
Another beautiful story is when you drove to Toronto and you crossed into the United States, then you came back you crossed back again.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite a trip.
Yes, it was a very, very fast, long trip. Yeah. My daughter and I were going to Toronto to retrieve her stuff from Toronto, and so we were just basically going there, grabbing the stuff, and coming back in a very short time. So it was a good experience, I guess, in terms of traveling with my daughter is always good, and it was a different kind of an experience, not a vacation by any means.
Have you observed subways?
I have. I want to tell a little story about not about subways, but about buses. But it's relevant. When I was still living in Fredericton, I had a friend of mine, Bill Lindley, who lives in Nova Scotia, a very good railway photographer, and one of my mentors. He needed to pick something up for me, a DVD, I think, and so we communicated, and he said, "Oh, I'm coming to Fredericton. Maybe you can meet me when I'm in town." I said, "Sure. Where are you going to be?" He says, "Well, I'm going to be at the bus depot on the north side of Fredericton at this time." I'm like, okay. So I went over to the bus depot at that appointed time, and when I approached it, I saw there was all kinds of buses of all different vintages all over the yard. They were all pulled out and out of the garage and were all over the yard. And there were all these people crawling all over them and going in the buses and taking pictures of them. And I looked at them and I said, "What are they doing?" I said, "They're taking pictures of these buses like it's just a bus. I mean, it's." And then I thought, "Oh, this is how people think of me when I take pictures of trains." And I said, it's all in your perspective, because there are people who are bus fans and there are people who are subway fans. And I used to not care much about subways except that I rode them, but I've become more interested in them, in subways and trams. I see the variety of them, and I see, I'm interested in all the different, where they go and how they serve people and the different routes they take. So I found my tastes and my interests have changed, as I've gone through this hobby for the past 20 odd years in terms of what I'm interested in. I used to be very meticulous about recording every engine number that I saw. you probably heard, in the UK, there's people that are train spotters who are very, very meticulous about that, and they want to make sure they've seen every locomotive of a particular type and so on. And I used to be like that. I used to track that very closely, and now I could not care less. So it is something that I've evolved away from, and I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just a shift in interests.
To cover one more area, it is you on gluten-free regimen.
Yes. Yeah, I have nothing to do with trains, but yeah, it's uh, I found out, I guess, a little over 3 years ago that I had celiac disease. Um, I'd had a lot of digestive issues for many years, and I didn't know why. Um, but what happened was I give blood, and I actually gave blood 2 days ago. And anyway, so was going to give blood, and they said, no, we can't take your blood. Your iron's too low. And I said, why? That's weird. So I went to see my doctor, and she did a blood test and said, yep, your iron is definitely low. And so she referred me to a specialist. She had me take iron supplements and stuff, but she referred me to a specialist. And then he sent me to do a test, and they stuck tubes in me and had a look at my intestines and said, yep, you have celiac disease. And I was shocked. Like, I eat bread every day and all this stuff. And then I went, oh. And I started doing the research. And because I didn't know much about it. I knew about people who couldn't eat gluten, but I didn't know much about it because I didn't think it affected me. And then, celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. So it attacks your immune system. And you can have many different symptoms or no symptoms at all. And so when I did the research, a lot of things that had been kind of weird about me, about my health, made a lot of sense. When I went, oh, that is a symptom of celiac disease. I had no idea. Things like I would have numbness in my fingers and toes. And I went to see a neurologist about it, and he had no idea why. That's a symptom of celiac disease. And there are a bunch of others that all of a sudden made sense because of that. So yeah, I've been gluten free since then, and it's a challenge, especially when you're traveling. But it's made a huge difference in my health. So I wrote about it some. I started a blog, glutentrain.com, that I'm probably going to give up because I haven't been maintaining it. But it's a different lifestyle, unfortunately. But it's fortunately something that can be treated with food. Food is my medicine.
What are you working on these days?
Let's see. I have been volunteering with a number of different railway-related organizations. So they've been taking up some of my time. I'm with the Via Historical Association, which is preserving full-sized Via Rail locomotives and passenger cars. So I look after their social media and their website. I recently rebuilt the website for the CN Railway Historical Association. So those two things have been taking up some of my time as well. I've been, of course, still maintaining my blog. I post once or twice a week, and organizing photos. I have a large collection of railway timetables and photographs, so I've been kind of organizing that. That's a lifelong thing that will never get done. But those are some of the things that have been taking my time. I've been on and off writing a novel, but it's currently on the off stage. But I've been kicking around. It's about a group of young rail fans. I may or may not ever finish it, but it's fun to think about and write. I keep thinking about doing a couple of photo books. Recently, I gave a talk at the local Winnipeg Model Railroad Club about night train photography, which is a fairly recent interest of mine. Going out in the middle of the nights to take pictures of trains and stars and aurora and whatever else comes along. The other thing that I've written about is on my blog is talking about mental health. It's something that's important to me because I was diagnosed with depression a few years ago. I want to help raise the awareness of that it's okay to talk about these things, that it's just it's a thing that happens to you, not necessarily something that needs to define you. It's something that I'm passionate about in terms of communicating and helping people understand and help people with what they're going through. It happens to a lot of people, and we don't talk about it enough. I write about that now and then on my blog, and I'll probably write more about it. But I guess I also want to talk about, since you talk about art. I don't really consider myself an artist in terms of drawing or painting or anything like that. I draw occasionally, but I'm not great at it. But I do it for fun. And but I really enjoy it when people use my photographs for art. And it's happened a few times where people will take my photographs and with my permission, and they'll create art out of them. So I have them on my wall here. There's a photo of this is a print of a painting that a woman did of a grain elevator demolition. She saw my photograph and wanted to make a painting of it. So as thanks, she sent me a print, and so to me that really touches me, because it's people seeing my art in photography and inspiring them for their own art. So I think that's great. This one's called Chasing Sunsets. Spending my time these days chasing sunsets, chasing after beauty over the horizon, trying to freeze them in the frame of my life, trying to freeze time while it's still there. Though I still feel the hot sun beating down from the sky in my head, I feel the change in the heat, a break, perhaps a start to a long cooling. At times I feel like nowhere is home, splitting my time and my heart and my mind. At times I feel like I'm always in transit, and change seems the only constant. Soon enough my own sunset will catch me, and sun's heat will yield to cold moonlight. For now I'll be content to chase sunsets, and hope I don't catch one for very long.